The overall message each week is found between the first reading and the gospel, where we are told to search for it. This week, it suggests that we can claim things about ourselves, about our backgrounds perhaps, our points of view, our dispositions, our gifts and talents. Yet, none of these claims can be verified without actions to back them up. We can claim to be another Einstein if we would dare, but if we're not quite able even to balance our own checkbook or write a paragraph coherently, then others are not going to be convinced of what we're saying. In all aspects of who we are, no area is quite as crucial to this need for verification through action than our claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, believers in him who desire to be his disciples. Clearly, if our names get into a baptismal register of a church, that might be a basic start, but not any guarantee that every name that does will actually belong to someone who fulfills the call to discipleship that we are given at that sacrament. Truly, contrary to the contemporary effort to domesticate Jesus as just a nice guy and thus minimize the impact of all he said and did should have on any who say they want to be known as his followers. Jesus was, in truth, someone who could and still might make us all a bit uncomfortable if we really listen to him. He didn't come among us just to be nice. He came to save us from ourselves, from our tendency first to self-preservation, and when we succeed at that, then to self-aggrandizement, and thus sin. Jesus saves us by offering us concrete examples of love that overcome self-concern, because his brand of love always demands self-sacrifice. In the example of Jesus, love is always synonymous with compassion, with being able to feel for and with the other. And so it never fails to take risks to extend mercy to them or to be generous with them, recognizing our fellow human beings, no matter the differences of race, ethnicity, or creed, as always being more like us than not, as he taught in that all-familiar parable, the Good Samaritan. So the good news, in some sense, is that if we really look around, there is perhaps no better time than our rather troubled times in which to try to walk our talk that we are actually following Jesus Christ. Because there are far too many people being excluded or pushed to the margins around us and among us. People thus who can use our care, who need our concern, our advocacy, our assistance, sometimes just simply by raising our voices on their behalf. Yet the sad tendency of us as human beings, even though we want to be disciples, is to retreat from doing things, from speaking up, from taking a side, because we know if we do, we're liable to be accused of making religion something political, and we are told that we are not under any circumstance whatsoever allowed to do that. But that's an error of thinking in our day. Just think, if the Christians of the mid-19th century had cowed to that pressure, and believe me, it was on them, then how many more decades would we have been living with that shameful scourge of human slavery in the supposed land of the free? Indeed, we are not supposed to tell anyone how to practice their politics. So let everyone keep their political preferences to themselves. But as Christian people, we're obliged to buck that trend, pushed actually by political interests themselves, that social ethics and morals based solidly in religious belief should not have any influence in the public square, as that gives free rein to all manner of ways that human dignity, which is God-given and universal, is allowed to be violated by the powerful. It is being violated now most especially as all who have come to this land and remained, even though they could not obtain the right documents to do so because of unjust laws, are now under threat of deportation. As Christians, do we have compassion for them? Do we think of them? Are we capable of having empathy with them, of the fear and uncertainty which they now must currently live each day, and due to which they probably have difficulty sleeping at night? Or are we so secure in our own certainty that we are not under threat that someone could take us from our homes or separate us from our children or our family and friends and detain us like cattle in some cold facility before sending us not even necessarily back to where we once came from, but simply out to places we might have never been before? All of this, even though many under threat may have been here for better than a decade, created a home, built a life, have a job, pay their taxes. It's suggested that they should go because the majority of them are dangerous criminals. But true research into the statistics proves that to be quite inaccurate. So are we going to cower and not speak up in protest should the life of our neighbors be at stake? What if we were in their shoes? I have discerned that I cannot help but speak up, and I'm deeply certain that my motives to do so are religious. They are not political. I am a priest. I think to myself, had I lived in the late 30s and early 40s in Europe as Jews and gypsies and the developmentally disabled and others were first denigrated and their lives completely devalued, so that few would complain as they were later eliminated. Indeed, if I had been there at that time and did not have the moral courage to speak up and out against this assault on human life and dignity, then I should rightly suspect that my own eternal salvation would certainly have been put in jeopardy. That was then. This is now. And no less than with abortion, euthanasia, capital punishment, a badly broken system has created in immigration an issue in which the dignity of very many human lives is now seriously at stake. Thus, as Christians, we are not permitted to sit idly by or silently so. So as we get back to our original question posed by the scriptures today, who do we claim ourselves to be? I know if I dare say I am a believer in and a follower of Jesus Christ, then the present plight of the undocumented people all around me has to matter to me greatly. In light of the many whose well-being could be destroyed by deportation, I could face the dilemma, and you might have to too, of whether to stand with those whose security and dignity is threatened, or to retreat to the safety of silence. So let us make no mistake about it. The issue of the deportation of the undocumented is clearly a potential litmus test to the authenticity of our own Christian belief and discipleship at this present time and in this particular place. So I say, please pray for me that I will have the courage to pass that test as I have to face it, as I must pray the same for you. Because to claim myself as Jesus's followers, but not have the courage to defend the life of my neighbor in need, would mean in the least that I am that blind guide, and it condemns me to the unhappiness of being an empty suit as a minister of the gospel. But ironically, justifiably fearful more so of one day being found without the necessary qualifications for admission to the only land in which I would ever really desire to live, that kingdom for which I pray daily to come as you do too, the one in which Christ's lay down your life for others brand of love will certainly be citizenship's primary requirement.